All right, here we go. We're on the registration tab now. This is pretty much where you're going to handle most of your day. You're going to be in registration. As you diminish that long line that's at your window, you will use this screen a lot. Most of the day you won't vary from this screen as you're doing the sign-up time frame. You'll be on this screen registering riders. So one of the first things you can do is obviously a couple different ways to add people to a race. First way would be searching their last name and their first name. And you'll also notice that as you search portions of first and last name, you may begin to get more names in the database. The database does contain the entire country, and again, as you change names around, you start to get a few more people, a lot more registration to choose from. If you're going to search by name, try to narrow it down as much as possible. But again, if you're not finding the person, simply one slight misspell could cause you to find no members. So if you're not finding it and they're fairly sure they're a registered rider, really start to back it down. I mean, you want to really take a hard look to try to find the person. Make sure, you know, it could be trying to think of a name that would be this way. You've got Brian's, and then you also have Brian's. So a couple different ways you can search. Obviously, B. Smith is going to return a lot of people in the database, and depending on the speed of your computer, it could take quite some time. But as you narrow it down to BRI, you then only get most likely the Bryans, maybe the Brileys, and the Britneys. And of course, in our case, we've got a couple office test scenarios, and we'll go ahead and register Juan for the race. He's a 1927 novice, and he's also going to race cruiser today. So you can notice when you hit that checkbox, it's checking them into the race, and then your last step would be to check obviously the proficiency that he's racing, and maybe just confirm that with the person at the window that that's still their class. If it's not, you'll want to go in the upper right corner here, move them to intermediate or expert, and make sure they're being registered for the right class. So at that point, you've got a few options on the registration screen. Obviously, class, cruiser. If you're offering opens that day, you can register for open. We've got the special Pro-Am class in there that we set up previously in the other video about setting up a race. If the rider has a sponsor, of course, Juan Hander is sponsored by Pole Magazine, and you can add in a sponsor. Those can be changed at any time if you misspelled or they change sponsors. And then obviously the bike number is your next thing that you really need to check on, because that's how you're going to deal with scoring all day, is identification of that bike number. So you're going to take the bike number that they're racing. If it's the 276, then you're all set. If it's not, you'll want to use this upper right hand corner of the license information to choose another number. Now, in the case of Juan Hander, he doesn't have any career numbers or district numbers or national numbers, NAG numbers, Gold Cup numbers. So he only has one option. We'll pull someone else up in a few minutes with a better example of other options. And then if the incorrect number is listed there, you hit that little plus button, and you've got options to add more types of numbers. You can't edit the default number, and you don't want to really edit any of the numbers because they're probably the correct numbers as long as you're running the right program version and database version. So as you hit the new button, it's going to ask you what the number is, NAG 19, and you go in there and you choose the NAG number. Obviously, if it's a Gold Cup number, it'll be 1, 2, or 3. You can choose the Gold Cup. Race of Champions. There's state numbers. You could be state 4, You add that number, and there you go. You can see now you've got two numbers to select from. We'll sign him up for the State 4 on his 20-inch bike and 276 on his cruiser bike. Your last step is going to be to check out. When you check out, you're basically getting a cash prompt so you know how much to charge them if your fees are correct. And just remember that the fees and a reporting option for the accountability of the fees isn't in the program, so this portion of it is built for the future. So at this point, you may just want to save or hit the enter key and go ahead and check out the transaction. So again, if the fees are wrong, you know what you're taking in at the window, and that's the checks and balances there. The other way to search a rider is obviously by serial number. A little bit harder. You need to either have the card in front of you or know the person's serial number. And I think that is not who I thought it was, but we'll just pull up mine. And as you get in there you go. It pulls them up directly. Very similar screen, same thing. And that's it. You've got serial number, last name, first name search. Now the next thing you've got to deal with is a brand new rider coming in. You've got a brand new rider coming to the window. They've never raced BMX before in their life, and they need to sign up. Obviously, you've got your pre-printed applications that we went through previously. I'll bring one up on the screen real quick, but you know, you've got that option there. Hopefully, it brings it up, and you'll see there's a serial number there, 0257 7100 and 7611. And at that point, you've got two options. But really, if they're bringing you the paper application, you're going to hit that Add Existing button. And you did just see that serial number and validation code, which we've been over that in previous videos too. And the serial number, you'll need to enter that serial number that's on that paper application and then that 4-digit validation code. Once you do that, it's going to bring you to this screen here, and it'll have that number entered in there. And then you've also got all the other information that you need to type into the system. Only the things in red are mandatory. If you're able to get more, obviously that helps your record keeping and your database. If you ever need to email one of your riders or grab a phone number to call someone about something, you have it all in your database. So it's always best to go ahead and fill out as much as you can if you've got the time to do it. So again, Add Existing. Once you hit this serial number and validation code and validate it off the application, the paper application, you're brought to that screen. If you don't do the pre-printed applications, you don't have paper applications available, and you're just going to talk the person through it, which is what I like to do, because you kind of get to know your customer a little bit better. You can maybe figure out what part of town they live in and talk to them about just general things in your town and get them to kind of understand what you guys are all about, and it gives you a few more minutes with the customer. You can always hit the Add New, and in this aspect it is generating a serial number out of the system, and you can go ahead and type some information in there. And again, only mandatory for those fields in red. So we've got one left over here. That is a birth date. If it's a female, make sure you always check that box. It'll give them the proper classes. The male classes, you've got novice, intermediate, expert. A lot of times the question comes on where the Strider membership is at, or the push bike membership. Your balance bike stuff is right in here under the Strider membership type. Primary is your normal. That's what it's always set to. If it's only a one-day membership that you're doing or a 30-day trial, you can choose those types. Obviously, if a pro comes to your track and they need to renew a pro license, you've got that option. Second or third family member is in there if they've got siblings that race and now they're starting to race. All of those options are there. And then if you do choose a second family member, it's going to ask you to link that family member. And at that point, it's kind of doing a search of the database to link the family member. But you'll want to select that rider in there and link them. The birth date, you've got your gender, and you don't need to get the 4-digit social, but if you know it or they're telling it to you, you can add that in there. And then when you hit add member, it is then going to commit that serial number to the database with this name. And obviously it's got the fees because I put second, so we'll go back to primary. You've got your $60 membership. You hit add member, and then if you've got your printer set up, it's going to print that application out of your printer ready to go. So that's where you'll want to put your application backs in. Pre-print the application backs, put them in upside down in the printer. Then you'll have a nice front and back paper for the rider to sign. The bottom portion of the membership is where you sign. Cut that off, send it back. We'll go through that stuff in other clerking areas that aren't race manager related. But that's it. Just double check that everything's right. Have them double check that everything's right. Make sure they add the emergency contact in there, but for the most part they're kind of just signing the front and back of the application. You're giving them their side, making sure they've given you a phone number and email, and you're off and running. They're now in the database with that same serial number. You'll notice every time you hit add new, it increases that serial number. The last one was 103. This one's now 104 for the last 3 digits, and now you'll see 0257 7105 is now on the screen. So that's where your number range block comes into play, and that's why you need it, because it's issuing serial numbers directly out of the program. So if you're just going to key these things in as they're at the window, you're all set to do that right there. If you've got the pre-printed paper applications that they're filling out and bringing to the window, you still need to put them in the database and do all that typing, which is why I prefer to just do the add new and get the information on the spot. But you're welcome to use this feature that does the add existing, and then you take that number that's on the application and add it in with the serial number and validation code, and then you're brought to the same screen that we were just working on. At that point, now we've got ready to set up, get them in the race for the day, and continue checkout, and you'll see that it also added those additional fees for the membership in there. The last thing you're going to see on there is the race entries tabs. We'll go over that a little bit more in another race where we've got a lot more riders than this, but that is generally how your day is going to go. You're going to just be searching first and last name or serial number. If you've got a card swiper that's reading cards, just make sure your cursor is on the serial number, swipe that card, it'll bring up the serial number and the rider to register for the race. That's about it for registering riders. In the next video we'll take a look at the race entries tab, kind of play around with that, show you some of the different features of that, and then we'll move on to the moto board.